Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Zuber. I'm the managing partner of Zuber Lawler. We're a law firm headquartered in Los Angeles. We have offices in various places across the country. Thanks to God, we do a lot of work for a wide variety of clients, Fortune 500 clients, including in the bioscience space. We're a bunch of nerds, though, is how I think of us. We love thinking about the future, what the world's going to look like in 10 years, and helping our clients work backwards from there. And so we're immersed in fields like longevity. Longevity is a personal passion of mine. And it's a very exciting thing to be here with this panel talking about AI and data and innovation relating to the longevity space. I have an exciting group of panelists here, and I'd like to let them each introduce themselves and their companies, and then we'll go ahead and dive into things. And why don't we start at the end there with Sammy?
All right. Hey, thank you so much. So my name is Sammy Mian. I'm actually with Venture Employer Solutions. We've got a pop up here. We've got a few guys from the company, one of the sponsors of the event. I'm actually their new Chief AI Officer. I'm also a professor in AI at Arizona State University.
I'm Pierre-Alexandre Fournier. I'm co-founder and CEO at Hexaskin. We make medical-grade wearables, digital biomarkers, and AI systems. The medical wearables we're focusing on is smart clothing for heart and lung monitoring.
Hi, I'm Rich Ears. Can you guys hear me? All right. I'm Rich Ears, Sarah. I'm a cardiologist by training, but for the last 20-some years, I've done medtech startups, 7 startups and counting still, and really looking forward to the opportunities AI gives us in accelerating innovation.
Great. Okay, so thank you all for coming. I'm excited to have this conversation here. Why don't we get started with something general? Each of you sits at the intersection of AI in a very particular domain: employment solutions, wearable biometrics, clinical development. What one thought would you like to convey to the audience here as far as how AI actually gets built and deployed in your particular field? And Sammy, why don't we start with you again?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Venture, we are in the employment solutions, the HR, the payroll, the benefits area. So a lot of things that affect people personally every single day, from where they get their paychecks to where they go for health insurance to what their onboarding and offboarding process is like at their jobs. And the one thing I want to emphasize to everyone is it's coming. There's no getting away from it. Like, AI is here for the long run. And what I'm trying to make sure my colleagues are doing, what our company is doing, is we're accepting it, but we're also understanding that with that comes a huge, not just opportunity, but expectation that, like, we have to make sure we do this right. We have to take care of you. We have to take care of your data. We have to make sure anything that we're using these tools for, like, we make sure it's always for the positive benefit of not just us as a company, but you as all of our customers, clients, and consumers. And so that's something that is very important, hence why my whole shtick this year has been governance and protections.
Well, good AI models follow good data sets. And in our case at Hexaskin, we build a physical layer to collect data from patients so that we can get these data sets right and build the AI models on top of it.
On the clinical and product development side, I think there's a couple of things that AI is starting to step into and a bunch of opportunities that it hasn't done yet. AI tools. When I say it, it's not a person other than, I prefer to call Claudine, because she's so friendly, but on the development side of a product, particularly products that look at, patterns, signals, etc., AI is starting to get deployed quite a bit in the medical device field, for sure, and definitely in drug development, as many of you guys know. It's being used to help basically see patterns that we otherwise needed, super experts who had been at it for 30 years to see in the past. And it's doing a pretty good job doing that. It's far from perfect, but so were the human experts, far from perfect. It has not yet been deployed where, at least I think, the real potential can be there, which is it becomes the product, or it becomes integrated into the product rather than just being used as a tool to better design, better develop, faster create the product. And I think there's a huge amount of work that's going to be done there, but regulatory and other factors will play heavily into that too.
Thank you. How many folks here actually use AI in the context of your work relating to longevity? Okay, that's
that
pretty much most of you. Okay, very good. Um, the term data-driven innovation gets thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean? And Pierre, let's go to you for this. Can you give an example, point to a time at which AI and the usage of data actually changed, improved a decision or a product at Hexaskin?
But I'll give two examples. First of all, is the design of the physical product. We didn't start by making smart clothing. We've tried a wide range of different form factors, and we found out, for example, that adherence to adhesive sensors was not great. Was not great, and we ended up because our design goals were to have a passive way to do data collection with zero data entry from patients. We ended up designing smart clothing, so it doesn't have adhesive and it's really easy to wear. And that was following, talking to hundreds of people, doing design work, design studies to get there. Another thing where we use AI right now, of course, is to do literature searches and get summaries of the medical literature and clinical trial literature to guide us in selecting approaches to design better clinical trials.
Very good. Well, that's a good example of that. We also hear a lot about the promise of large data sets. And at the same time, these data sets, they can be messy, they can be incomplete, they can be biased. How do you handle that in practice? And Ruchir, we'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I mean, just because you have a lot of data, if it's garbage data, we all know, particularly the scientists in the room, it's still garbage. You just have more garbage. So getting good data does matter. AI tools can be deployed to help clean data, because what you do mentally when you're cleaning data, you could train a AI expert system to do. But you still fundamentally want to get quality data to come to quality conclusions. Otherwise, you get garbage data leading to garbage conclusions that later are disproven, or you find out that what you developed actually created more problems than it solved. So I would say, although AI has been promoted based on massively large data sets, the value could come as long as you have a clean data set, it could accelerate lots of things. So for example, clean data from 100 humans with tons of data could be much more valuable than garbage data from 100,000 humans, like most of your medical record data as it is today.
So then the solution, if I'm hearing you correctly, is actually at times not to just go to the world at large and the data set of the universe at large, but actually to have confined data sets that you can control and exercise a quality control mechanism in regard to.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two different purposes of what you do with data. One is hypothesis generating. So if I want to take 100,000 or 1,000,000 patients from the Banner Health System, it's going to be very messy data, but I can generate some hypotheses from that, and AI can get me to those hypotheses much faster. But if you want to really test your hypotheses and get to, conclusions from there, you really want clean data sets to do that testing. So that either means culling into clean data sets, or ideally going forward in a more prospective way and evaluating it that way. AI can help you design your study design because it can survey the medical literature a little faster than you can. And it can also help you do that initial analysis to see, does this design make sense? Should I continue down this path?
Very good. Let's talk a bit about ethics. I think many or all of us are concerned. We're excited, obviously, by the promise of AI in terms of making our lives simpler and easier. We also have a great deal of concern, I think, about privacy and also about understanding where information came from to confirm its veracity. So in that context, how do you think about data ownership and provenance? I'm especially asking in regard to when the data is coming from individuals' bodies, health records, and employment records. Pierre, why don't we go to you for that?
Well, data privacy is very important, but we need to define it correctly. The way we see data privacy is that your personal data should be working for you and not against you. And we need to design rules for that in that intent. People support the use of their data for as many things as possible that can help you live a better life. They support the use of data for health research because the confidence in medical professionals and health scientists is still very high. But at this point, I think we need better privacy laws. It has not been updated in a very long time, and I think big tech is kind of in the way of that privacy law reform because it would kind of break their business model right now.
Sammy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I teach an AI ethics class at the university because this is something I care about quite a bit, and it's been fun to just explore with my students what their conceptions are of the space and of just the policies, the legal obligations we have. The problem is like there is a huge fracturing in terms of like okay, what is on paper things that have to be followed, and what are just fun suggestions that some companies can ignore. And we have a few states in our country that are kind of leading the charge around privacy standards, data standards, California and New York being two of them. But then as you look at a more global scale, you have the European Union with their AI Act driving forth certain standards. You have some of the countries down in Southeast Asia that are starting to spin up their own standards. And it's still a space where we're trying to explore, okay, where is the fine line between being too invasive and too liberal with what the policies are. I think like my company is a data broker. We have records for I don't know 5-6 million people that we pay every week, and we have a duty to them to protect their information and use it only in ways that are we'll say pre-approved, things that are agreed to in our contracts with them. Anything outside of that, and sued. So it's a double-edged sword of what is expected in your industry and what your customers expect, and then what are the expectations from a more legal aspect. And we're starting to see now that consumers are actually opting in or opting out of what programs they're going to use, what companies they're going to work with based off some of these decisions. Are you more data privacy focused and conscious, or are you just going to take my stuff and do whatever, but give me a nice discount? I've seen both ends of it.
So I think that is quite an antagonistic relationship, right? Because the more data that we give to an AI tool, the more returns we get, obviously. But at the same time, after getting the answer to your query, when you're using AI, and for instance, just using, let's say, Claude was mentioned earlier, the corporation owns that data, and it's the same thing if you're wearing a biometric, for instance. You're getting feedback that helps you in the moment, but then the corporation carries all of that data that's accumulated over a period of years. So that leads into our next question here. Where do you draw the line between personalization and surveillance, particularly when AI models can infer things about a person that were never explicitly disclosed, which makes things even more interesting and I think raises the stakes a bit. And why don't we, Sammy, why don't we stay with you on that one?
Oh man, where do you draw that line? I mean, I'm not an ethicist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm an engineer. So I would always give engineering answers to these questions. I just don't think that's going to cut it these days. Um, you're right that it is an antagonistic relationship. I will say a lot of companies are starting to get smart, and here's the power of being a company. You go to a big AI provider and you say, I want an enterprise contract, and you can notate in that we own all of our data, you don't own all of our data. There's stipulations on what the AI provider is allowed to do with that data. Now, here's the thing. You pay for that privilege to actually stipulate what happens with your data. Average consumers, any of us, we can't do that with our OpenAI accounts or our ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, what have you. And so that is where more of these protections from like the government, legal entities need to step in to help the consumers. In terms of that fine line, it really I think depends on the data too. Like one of the things I teach about is membership inference attacks, where you can look at totally anonymized data and actually use AI to figure out who that data is for. You can tell if somebody was in a cancer trial group or is getting treatment for a certain type of experimental, treatment for a disease, or you could tell if somebody was negatively affected by a tool just based off of their anonymized data. Like that is a real possibility now. And with AI, it's just getting easier and easier. Did you know you can use Wi-Fi to look inside of a room that has no windows and doors? I did, using AI. Super possible right now. That is scary to me as somebody who's about to be a parent. Um, so I don't think I have an answer right now. It's more of it's something we're all trying to learn together. And the biggest part of it is really understanding, okay, what can these tools do? with how little data, and how do we, make sure that we're addressing that?
Pierre, obviously you have a personal stake in this at Hexascan, and it's sort of an unfair question because I don't think anybody has. Well, I'm quite confident that nobody I've heard of has actually figured out the answer to how to where the balance lies and how to achieve and enforce that balance. So it's an unfair question, but at the same time, I'm asking it. What do you think about that from your perspective, where you sit at your company?
Well, our philosophy is that our user own their data, but we have a license to provide services based on that data,
Mhm.
and we have a license to do R&D with that data to develop better models, to develop new digital biomarkers.
So your customers own their data.
Yes.
That's one way to do it, and I stand corrected because that is, I guess, a solution to it to the extent that that can be enforced, so to speak, in terms of ownership. Okay, very good, and that's a great answer. There is let's talk about legal. It's my favorite topic. What legal risks do you think companies in your space, the longevity space, are most likely underestimating right now when it comes to deploying AI systems that rely on personal or biometric data? And Ruchir, why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I don't know if people saw the news last week that Claude has released a new kind of code review software, but they've limited that release to very few companies because they found in their initial testing they're finding vulnerabilities all over the place. And so this is an example of the sort of things that are unexpected that show up that AI can do. And there's a big debate going on in the news if you read about it. Maybe Claude's trying to be a good actor, releasing it to companies in advance, like banks, for example, so they can close their vulnerabilities before it's released out in the world where, bad actors can go after it. The same thing in terms of the legal and I'll say societal implications in addition to legal exist with AI. I mean, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good uses and it can be used for malicious uses. And we're going to need to come face to face with that. We as humans like to have control of things, control our data, control what's being done, control the responses to things. AI tools take away some of that control. So suddenly you're getting a response from a doctor that's based on an AI feedback, and we feel uncomfortable. You drive on the highway in your EV that's automatically driving, but if it gets in an accident, you feel it's just completely unacceptable, even though the accident rate is much lower than maybe you driving yourself. So the answer to this kind of will fall in this gray zone of what Congressman Schweiker talked about as societal priorities, and those will be different from region to region in terms of legal implications. Individual ownership, individual freedoms, that will also be different from geography to geography. I mean, in some cases, you use an AI-developed product, you end up getting an injury that may or may not be related to the product. Can you sue because it was AI developed? We don't know that yet. And I think, Tom, there's tons of questions like this out there. Let me add one more thing in terms of legal risk. Patenting. How many people here have written patents or been involved in writing patents? A few of you. It's an incredibly arduous process if you've done it. Hundreds of hours before you even get it to the start of the process. You can use an AI tool today, just about any of the regular generative AIs, not even specialized patent AIs, and you can generate your patent in 1/100th of the time. Can somebody sue to say you stole my idea because you used information that the AI tool had ingested and you don't actually get a right to that patent? There's tons of legal questions that come in what we're doing that actually haven't been legislated yet.
I will say, if you don't mind me just adding to that, was it last year, I think? Google tried to file a patent and they tried to put an AI bot on as one of the inventors, and the patent office struck that down and said, no, you can't do that. It can only be humans listed as inventors on patents. So for now, that's a win for us, but
Right.
who knows how long that'll
I think
last.
we actually wrote something on that. I'm not positive, but it's. I think some of you could have been lawyers. That's not an insult. Because you're actually talking about things that we actually talk about at my firm. And one of the things that you realize as a lawyer is that the law does really a truly terrible job of keeping up with technological innovation. And that's been true for a century, but it's especially true now, and it's just going to get worse. So I think basically the place that these things are going to land is not really with legislators. Sometimes that'll happen. I think in Europe, more likely than the United States, they tend to be more forward looking, but really in the courts, unfortunately, and that's just the sad truth. Speaking of the EU, they do tend to, I think, be more forward-looking at times when it comes to things like AI regulation and so forth. Several states in the EU have moved toward AI-specific regulation. From your perspective, these frameworks helping or hindering innovation? And is there a model that you think gets the balance right? And Sammy, we'll stick with you on that.
Oh, that's a good question. I've been talking a lot about the EU lately in class. Just the standard EU AI Act, which actually classified AI usage into 4 risk levels, risk categories based off of both the data it had access to and the intended or unintended outcomes of those AIs. I know some of the states in the EU countries are moving towards either more stricter guidelines on how AI can be used, what decisions can it make, what data can be used. I think when it comes to hindering innovation, like nothing's going to stop. Just I'm not even an engineer. Anybody just sitting in a room with ChatGPT, going back and forth, thinking up things, right? I think a lot of those laws really come into place when we start talking about testing and trials and rolling out these new products. And look at the healthcare industry. We have a very regimented process in multiple aspects on how you could do testing and trials. And I think in general, it has been beneficial. Maybe some of you disagree with me. Again, I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. But I think in general, in the long term, it's going to help because a lot of these policies are actually going to guide towards, okay, not only what kind of products and innovations are going to be acceptable to use in society, but what are people going to be more comfortable trusting and using. So,
Very good. I'd like to ask, we don't have too much time yet, and I'd like to ask some questions that are specifically tailored to each of you and your companies and your contacts, because I think there's a lot of information and learning to be had there. So why don't we go ahead and start with Ruchir. You've worked across meditech, pharma, and diagnostics. Where is AI most reliably accelerating time to market for these medical technologies, and where is the hype still outpacing the evidence?
Drug development is hard, and AI is being used, I think, extensively now in finding initial drug candidates. It's still going to be hard. It's still going to take, many years, decades to get a drug to market, but you may get candidates sooner. So pharma, for sure, it's being used, or pharma biotech. Medical devices, whenever there's software involved, AI is getting used quite a bit, I think, in the initial development, algorithm development, and things like that. For sure, anybody who's writing software is using AI today to help write code. I mean, I'd be shocked at, do you know anybody who's not using AI?
we fired those people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's definitely I don't know if you saw the announcement in February from the CEO of Spotify, where he said they have not written code. A human has not written code for 2 months for Spotify. So they went to a complete AI version, and they're just doing code reviews with humans.
Wow, I didn't read that. That's incredible.
So
That's scary.
definitely on the med device side, and that heads towards diagnostics.
Yeah.
Where it hasn't been used yet, where I think the real opportunities are, and I think people just don't know how to deal with it regulatory-wise, is how to use the data in real time, how to personalize the data for an individual. How do I get that approved and allowed to be used? And I think that's our great frontier where it's going to supercharge and super accelerate from all our clinical studies are based on averages. On average, somebody with this drug is going to do this well. But if you look at averages on any graph, if you plot out how somebody did, there's some people who didn't do that well and some people who did super great. Can you personalize that to know you as an individual are going to do better? And you may need to do that by looking at people longitudinally. Expert doctors tried to do that, but they only see a patient every so often. If you could see that patient, let's say with Pierre's technology, all the time, you can very quickly know the effect, let's say, a drug is having or a device is having in real time. We haven't done that yet, but it's coming. And I think that'll be the real wave of innovation that comes.
Very good. Pierre, Hexoskin captures physiological data in real time and in real world conditions, not just in a lab. How does that shift from controlled and continuous monitoring change the kind of AI models that you can build at Hexaskin? And what new clinical or performance insights has that contextualized data unlocked?
Well, yeah, we spend hopefully a very small fraction of 1% of our time in clinical settings where we're measured by health professionals. The rest of the time, there's not much data collected. What we're doing is we're building the infrastructure to collect data from your body wherever you are. And that allows us to create new data sets and build better AI models for these people. I think what's really important in what we do is that we try to lower the cost of clinical evidence. We cannot run enough clinical trials for all the questions we have. So we need to find a way to reduce the cost of collecting that data to accelerate research, develop better biomarkers that can be used for faster drug development, for example, but also better diagnostics in the future. So AI does pattern matching. So we're investing in ways that we can use our whole database to build foundational physiological models that we can then specialize on smaller data sets that we collect in very controlled ways in clinical trials. And that leads to new products, both for pharma development, clinical research, and diagnostics.
Very good and exciting, Pierre. Sammy, Venture serves a massive number of employers and employees worldwide, obviously. When you're deploying AI that scale across payroll, benefits, and workforce management, how do you ensure the models perform equitably across very different industries, geographies, and employee populations? And for folks who aren't aware, you can really get into trouble here because the population composition can change dramatically from state to state, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The laws and regulations can change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so the question is being asked in that context, which obviously Sammy's familiar with.
Well, it's the same as my two panelists here fellow panelists have talked about, which is almost personalization. But now it's super focused on all of these niches. We don't have a one-size-fits-all approach because that won't work. What works in Arizona would get us in trouble in Sweden or France. Venture's been pushing this last year that we've been going global. We're operating in over 100 countries now, and every country is different. A lot of states are different. And so we have multiple approaches to figuring this out. One is building focus models on different environments, different ecosystems. These are the policies that we break down from a country classification, from a state classification, in some cases from a local jurisdiction classification when you start talking about gig economy, tip-based workers, non-standard or certain types of exempt positions. It's all different. And we do benchmarking, we do drift analysis. Like as a scientist, have brought in a number of different tools we're building to actually keep track of our AI models and approach to make sure that they're still acting as they should be. But we've also taken another route. We have started using AI in our compliance side. We actually acquired a compliance company that focuses on different jurisdictions. Right now they're focused on the US. We're starting to expand into Europe, and we've actually worked with several law firms to build out our databases, and we keep them up to date every day, every week, every year. I have my own, Sammy bot that is scanning for changes in legal frameworks every single day to see what might be coming up, what do we need to get ahead of, what do we need to pull in general counsel on to make sure we are staying away from getting in trouble. And then we run scenarios, we do red teaming, we test our system. I try to break our system to see, okay, where will it fail? Is it going to fail? What if this rule changes here? What if we decide to put the penguins in Antarctica on payroll? How is our system going to react to that? We've never run payroll in Antarctica. So it's a combination of trying to stay ahead of the game while continuously monitoring and testing. Very similar to the world of cybersecurity, actually.
Very good. And obviously that lesson applies to so many different contexts, including companies that are collecting biometric data from various jurisdictions and so on and so forth. Okay, on this last question, I'd like to hear from all of our panelists, and we're out of time, so we'll make our answers quick and the question quick. For our audience, some of whom are founders, clinicians, investors, focused on longevity, health span, what is the single most actionable step that we can take today to leverage AI and data in our longevity health span work? We'll start at the end, Sammy.
All right, I'm just gonna say this: don't be afraid of it. Get yourself a subscription, even if it's a free one. Play around with it. Be careful what data you put into it, because again, you might not own it. But play around with it. Try it. Ask it some questions. I know a majority of the younger generation now, they don't go to Google anymore for questions. They go to ChatGPT. They go to Gemini and they ask their questions there, and they get a really nice fine-tuned response back. Try that for yourselves. See what it can do for you and compare it to what you're using right now.
Well, my take would be we need to invest in data strategy and data infrastructure because AI just follows the data. And what gets me really excited about medical wearable devices is that they're new instruments, and new instruments lead to new scientific theories. Microscopes gave us germ theory. Digital cameras gave us machine vision and AI systems for object detection. And medical grade wearables will change the way we look at disease, change the way we do health research, and change the way we practice medicine.
It's hard to follow that answer. It's excellent, Pierre, but I'll try to get down to like my ground level, which is very simple. If you are not using AI multiple times a day for just any question that pops in your head, you should. Figure out where you're going on vacation. Figure out how to plan out your taxes. Just get comfortable with the tool, just like you're comfortable with using the internet. It is a tool that you need to understand what it can do and also its limitations. You need to see it fail in front of you. You need to see when you train it and tell it it's wrong, how it responds. If you've never done this, like I do this all the time, I go for a walk and I talk to my AI while I'm walking. It's really an interesting conversation with somebody that I disagree with a lot of times. So get really familiar with, and I'm just saying the generative AI tools to start with. For the scientists out there, if you're not using open evidence, you absolutely should get on. It is by far the strongest, let's say at least medical science database AI tool out there. It is valued at crazy numbers if you don't know the investing side of it. I think open evidence is pulling like 15 billion of value with 300,000 users right now. It's incredible. So, and it is better than just asking the same question from a regular general generative AI tool. So if you haven't used open evidence as scientists, please use it.
Let me just add this there. It's early days. These tools are amazing, but they're not God. They don't know everything. They are not right all of the time. Keep that in mind. You are still the experts in your field, not the chatbot.
Yeah, I'll add something to that, and then we'll close. I don't know if we have time for questions, but this applies to law. It applies to data and longevity. It applies to anything. The way we look at it at Zuber Lawler is we say that AI is or ChatGPT or Claude or Harvey, that it's like the world's most knowledgeable first-year associate, except it lies and has terrible judgment. And if you treat it that way, it's actually amazingly useful. That's an incredible asset. But if you don't understand that it is so knowledgeable, but it lies and has terrible judgment, you're fucked. Pardon my language, but you really are. You're going to get into serious problems here. That's not just in law, but that's in using data, that's in designing a system, and that's in doing so many other things. So I think that leaves a spot for human beings, which is trust, right? At some point, you have to have a human being between the AI and the user of that AI, and that's where I think Hexoskin, for instance, or other companies like a law firm, stands between AI and stands between the user and AI and can facilitate that trust, and that's a good spot for us human beings to land. Thank you very much. And do we have time for questions? Great. Well, any questions here? Yes, sir. we're going to get into some really freaky philosophical stuff because there's a notion that we're living in a simulation, and in that context, if reality is a reflection of consciousness, like in a Buddhist sense, and quantum mechanics sort of confirms that, then what you're actually seeing, like for instance in Aliens, where you have Paul Reiser speaking to Sigourney Weaver and then you start looking at, okay, we start to learn from that, and we start to, and consciousness, reality starts to reflect consciousness. We can go down that rabbit hole some other time when we're both drunk. But anyway, I have to say, out of loyalty to Stanley Kubrick, I've refused to watch 2010, but you may have convinced me to watch it, so I'll actually, is it pretty good? I'll have to watch that. Thank you for the comments, sir. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Could you speak up a little bit, sir? Who are going to look at legal as the cost of customer acquisition. What do you mean by that? That's such a large question. I imagine that's directed at me. It's such a large question, and it does not have a satisfactory answer. And if it had a satisfactory answer, that person would be famous, and we'd all know that person's name. And it's not me. So that's such a huge question. I can tell you this though, that it really comes down to I think there has to be a sense of accountability that's enforced, I think, upon companies, but it has to be done in a way that recognizes that companies don't move forward if they're overregulated. So it's sort of an antagonistic relationship, right? Because on the one side, I defend companies typically, right, against class actions, right? And some of the laws, I think, go a little bit too far in making it a little too easy to cause problems for instance, a small business owner. When you're looking at Meta, or you're looking at Apple, or you're looking at Google, that's one thing. They have all the money in the world to pay lawyers to keep the other side counsel busy forever. But where it really starts to impact companies in a bad way are when they're smaller companies, and you're just large enough to have a class act to qualify for a class action lawsuit, but at the same time you're not large enough to actually pay for the defense. And so it leads, so there really is a flip side to those things. And the answer is a really complicated one. And unfortunately, I don't have a good one for you, except to say that I don't think that we're getting it right now. And I think that I do think that we both have a need for more responsibility on behalf of consumers and the people that use technology and that use things that interact with technology, including in a data context, a data-driven context. But also, on the flip side of that, small business owners get crushed in particular states. For instance, like California, where I think that they do not get the balance right on the opposite side of things. So it's a very complicated question, and success and the answer varies by jurisdiction. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important comment in multiple ways. So first, your preferred AI tool, if you've kind of trained it up in the way you like it, ask that same question to another AI tool, and it's going to be quite different, the answers you get, and you'll be shocked. So it's clear that it's learning from you in the way you want to teach it, even if you were completely wrong in the way you taught it. So, that gets to the bigger question of how can we critically use these tools or have the right critical mindset, which currently, I think among those of you who are professors, you have the hardest job to do. Being an expert with many years of experience in legal, you're going to use the AI as that first-year associate. But what happens to the real first-year associate who comes there, who's actually not as good as the AI in pulling that information? Yeah. Where do they get to become an expert in 15 to 20 years if you don't really need them right now? Is there a lost generation we're facing, and what are we going to do with this generation of people, which I actually don't know. I mean, you guys as professors have to figure out a way to train these guys to be critical, use these tools to make themselves valuable.
Go ahead, Sammy.
I was just going to say, first of all, if you ever feel like coming down to Sun Devil Country, you're always welcome to come speak. What I used to do in the early days of this AI, one of the first things I'd have my students do is I'd say, pick a topic that you're really passionate about. It could be Lord of the Rings, it could be baking, it could be something that, an area you love, you've spent time outside of your job, learning about. Go have an AI agent write a 2-page thing on it. Deep dive into some topic. Fantastic. Print it out. Here's a red marker. We're going to go through and figure out everything it got wrong. And that was one of the first experiences a lot of them got. It was quite eye-opening to say, oh, okay, this actually doesn't know as much as I thought, but it says it very confidently. I'm like, fantastic. That is our basis. But imagine that's just draft 1. Now you work with it. You teach it. You train it on what it should know, where it should go to learn. Is it Food Network? Is it one of the old Tolkien archives to learn more? That is how you work with AI. But it's very good for level setting.
On all of that, one thing that I think is important to focus on, and this is, I think this is philosophical as much as practical, and it relates to ethics. I think it's just a sense of human responsibility. It's the maintenance of critical thinking skills, and Ruchir, you had mentioned this as well. But what happens to critical thinking skills if we're trusting AI? So you had made a note, which is that I know what a first-year associate looks like, and I can sort of tell. That's I think, such an appropriate example, and it's not just legal. It could be with, for instance, biometric data. It could be with clinical data. It can be with employment data. But it's so important to have experts interacting with AI in these fields, because if I'm not familiar with, for instance, I am actually on employment, but let's say I'm not familiar with employment issues, right? And I start using AI, I'm not going to know that I shouldn't be trusting it. I need to go to Sammy to interact with AI so that Sammy can be more efficient. It costs me less. I get better results because Sammy's enabled with a super tool, which is AI, which is a super tool. But at the same time, Sammy has to be the person that I trust to filter that knowledge. And Sammy needs to be encouraged and even required by society to actually do the critical thinking as he's developing as a first year, as a second year, as a third year associate, equivalent of that in Sammy's field, right? And I think that's true for all of us. So I think as human beings, we all have a responsibility to make sure that we don't stop thinking critically and that we don't start trusting AI to be an expert in fields that we're not also an expert in. So a professor in longevity using it, I think, to facilitate longevity research makes all the sense in the world. But me using, actually, I'm kind of a nerd, so I'm a biomedical engineer by education. But to make the point, though, I'm not a longevity scientist. I'm not a professor, and I'm not at that level, not nearly so. And for me to use it in that way, to approximate that, is so dangerous, not just for me personally, but for society at large, if that starts happening across the population. So I think that that's a very important point that was made, which is that we really need to focus as a society, as a human species, on maintaining those critical thinking skills and finding a way to enable the younger generations behind us to acquire those critical thinking skills. And that really, I think, is in jeopardy right now today, and it's in severe jeopardy. I think that's probably good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
Give them a round of applause. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for a great panel.